Hello, everyone. Today, IVE got a brilliant novel to share with you. After struggling with her inner turmoil, the protagonist finally finds a moment of peace. But this tranquility is shattered by a series of urgent knocks on the door. When she opens the door with mixed feelings and sees the people standing there, she's stunned. This isn't an ordinary visit, it hides immense danger and secrets. How will the protagonist respond to this sudden situation? Chapter 19. Ariel, bless her heart, had been my anchor in this storm of emotions. Each day, she'd arrive with a new distraction, a puzzle, a movie marathon, even an impromptu dance lesson. But despite her valiant efforts, my mind kept drifting back to that fateful night. I replayed the scene over and over, reminding myself that No's cold shoulder was a consequence I'd have to bear, hoping that forgiveness would come someday. As for Xavier, it'd been the one to push him away, and now I had to live with that choice, no matter how much it stung. The conflicting emotions, regret, longing, anger, and sadness were a maelstrom in my head, threatening to pull me under. I let out a heavy sigh, my hands instinctively moving to rub my tired eyes. Sleep had become an elusive luxury, insomnia my constant companion in these troubled nights. From the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans provided a comforting backdrop to my spiraling thoughts. Ariel's presence was a balm to my frayed nerves, and I found myself immensely grateful for her unwavering support. The aroma of her cooking began to permeate the air, momentarily distracting me from my inner turmoil. As if on cue, Ariel emerged from the kitchen, a vision of domestic bliss with two steaming bowls balanced in her hands. "I made fried rice," she announced triumphantly, her voice cutting through the din of the TV. The scent of her legendary shrimp fried rice hit me like a wave, instantly making my mouth water. "Oh my," I breathed, reaching out eagerly for my bowl. I took a moment to admire the perfect golden grains, studded with plump shrimp and vibrant vegetables. "Thank you so much, Ariel. You know just how to make me feel better," I said, managing a genuine chuckle. Ariel's answering grin was wide and warm, a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds of my melancholy. "Dig in," she exclaimed. After only 5 minutes spent listening to the soft clicks of our chopsticks digging into the bowls and the faint chatter of the characters playing on TV, we were interrupted by a slight knock on the door. Ariel and I both froze in our actions, not sure we had heard correctly. We stared at each other, our jaws now frozen, but our cheeks puffed, unable to chew on the food in our mouths because we were fighting so hard to listen for the sound again. A louder knock came a second later, and my eyes widened as they traveled from the door to Ariel's shocked face. She quickly began chewing on her food and swallowed before hissing at me, "Go get it." I shook my head in defiance. "No, who do you think it is?" No one had knocked on our door in days, and I was too afraid to find out which of the two people who disappointed immensely in our last meeting had given in first. I don't know. Idiot. Go get it now." Ariel was whisper, yelling at this point, and to be completely honest, her defiant no backing down glare had me gulping in fear, and I reluctantly set my bowl of fried rice down on the table before taking a stand. I rubbed my clammy palms over the black sweatpants I hadn't changed out of in the past 3 days and inhaled deeply. This time, an even louder knock sounded on the door, and it was much more urgent. I huffed and stalked over to the front door, my hand hesitantly reaching out for the handle and yanking it open. My heart took a leap right out of my chest when I found myself staring directly into sparkling jade orbs. Noah stood on the other side with his knuckles raised up, ready to knock on the door again. Only this time he would have hit my nose instead. I took a step backward, trying to see him in better light, and that's when I noticed the odd look settled on his features. He had a slight frown on his face that creased the skin between his thick eyebrows. My heart broke just considering the mere thought that I might be the reason behind the pain swarming behind his eyes. I hated myself to an indescribable amount because of the pain I had unintentionally caused my best friend, someone I consider my own blood. "I'm so sorry." My voice broke. For days I had imagined that this would be the first thing I'd tell him in our next meeting, to immediately express how guilt, written I am and truly apologetic for hurting him and misusing his trust in me. Noah glanced into my eyes for a millisecond and before turning his gaze back to the floor. He nodded slightly. I know, he whispered. Do you forgive me? I managed to croak out, my throat restricting as I fought back some tears. I do. Nora. This time he looked up at me and held my gaze. But don't lie to me, a guy. I started shaking my head manically before he even had the chance to finish his sentence. I won't. Never again. I promise. Noah sighed, the crease between his eyebrows gradually relaxing. He shifted on his foot, and I realized I forgot to invite him in. I moved to the side to offer space to walk in motion with my hand inside my apartment. He accepted the offer and took a step forward. Another movement followed behind him and my gaze shifted to the dimly lit hallway to finally notice that he wasn't alone. Two more built figures copied his motion and moved forward with him, entering my house and into the brightness of my apartment. As the fluorescent shone down on their features, my eyes wide and in both confusion and disbelief. Ariel gasped from behind me, coming to stand beside me by the open door. What in the world brought you all together? I was still tongue-tied by the image displayed in front of me. We've spent the last 3 days studying the dangers you've gotten yourself involved with. Elliot announced Grumpy Ly as he sighed, stepped his way towards my living room. Nora, you might need to close that door and have a seat. What dangers? Elliot, what the heck is going on? Ariel demanded. A warm hand reached out and placed itself on top of mine, the one still gripping onto my front door. The burning sparks ignited under my skin and I instantly pulled my hand away. Nora, take a seat, please. Xavier politely instructed as he pushed my front door closed and waited for me to move. I was beyond confused, my mind a jumble of mess and unable to think on its own, so all I could do was follow their instructions. I moved my feet towards the living room and sat across from Elliot and Noah. What is going on? I whispered. I studied their postures and found Noah fiddling with his thumbs while avoiding eye contact, and Elliot looking to stiff and uncomfortable in his position. My eyes moved to Xavier standing tall to our right, his hands inside his dress, pants pocket, and looking alarmingly relaxed. Xavier let us in on everything that's happening, and we had been studying the accuracy of his claims for the past 3 days. Elliot began to explain. What is happening? Ariel asked. I can't be the only one left out. Someone please explain. I nodded my head. I don't even know what's going on. Elliot sighed and rubbed his hands together. An infamous group of men has been trying to get to Xavier lately, he explained, and we're now on their radar. I gawked at him in disbelief. What do you have to do with anything? Sure, I might be gone out on one date with Xavier, but they can't be seriously hunting down my friends because of that single occasion. Unless they're so desperate to catch Xavier that they're willing to hurt innocent bystanders in the process, which frankly scared me way worse than the idea of myself being hunted down by those men. We've been associated with Xavier. We're considered companions, and that's enough reason for them to try and use us to lure Xavier out. My heart began to mine faster against my rib cage, and I could feel the blood flowing faster towards my brain and making me feel lightheaded for a minute too long. I stared at the ground in shock, trying to compose myself and find a solution to our conflict. How do you know they're after us? Ariel voiced out quietly. Elliot sighed, rubbing his hands over his jeans. We were quietly watching you guys over the past 4 days. He began to explain. The same 3 men have been keeping tabs on your whereabouts, but they never intruded, probably waiting for the right order before going in. Ariel gasped, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. My blood suddenly ran cold. And why are you so calm about this? Why aren't you freaking out? Ariel shrieked out my exact thoughts. Elliot seemed awfully calm considering the danger I had unintentionally put everyone in, and it was beginning to frighten me. Because we have a way out. Xavier spoke up from his position to our right. Ariel and I turned our attention to him, and I frowned in disapproval. I didn't know what their solution was, but thinking of how all 3 of them had joined and thought of an answer together was frightening enough. And what would that be? Ariel asked. returning her attention to Elliot. He was clearly avoiding our gaze, which stressed me out further. Noah was still sitting silently, fiddling with his thumbs and very clearly fighting a battle of his own in the privacy of his mind. I would have paid however much needed to have a single glimpse of the war raging on in there. Well, I demanded, growing frustrated. How do you suggest we prolong our inevitable doom? I could feel the couch Ariel, and I shared moving slightly as she bounced her legs up and down in agitation. Her nerves in overdrive, but I didn't blame her. I was fighting so hard to keep a steady composure myself. We're moving to Indiana for the time being. Noah finally spoke up. My jaw dropped in utter disbelief. What? Ariel exclaimed. It's the only way to ensure our safety until the conflict is resolved. Elliot explained. You're kidding me. Right. I couldn't help but let out a slight chuckle, which did not impress Elliot one bit. He frowned at me in disapproval. We're perfectly serious. Nora, they can't be. I shook my head in refusal. Were they seriously asking us to move away? I was hyperventilating by that point. My head was shaking uncontrollably, continuously moving from left to right. If they all agreed to the plan and chose to leave, I would have no one left here with me, and I couldn't bring myself to move away and leave everything that I know behind. How dare they even consider such a proposition? No, no, no. No, I mumbled. Nora, we have no other solution. Elliot narrowed his eyes. I'm not moving away, I exclaimed. It won't be forever. Noah spoke up. Just until Xavier deals with whatever problem is going on. My head suddenly stopped moving. I jumped up from my seat promptly, my eyes moving to where Xavier stood so calmly with his arms crossed out over his chest. His eyes fell on my crazed ones, and they softened as he studied my posture. I strode over to him furiously, my index finger coming up to poke him in the chest roughly. You tricked them into agreeing to this, didn't you? I yelled angrily. His arms loosened and fell to his sides, but he didn't move a step from where he stood. It's the only solution we have. Nora. The rage was boiling through my veins, and my head was beginning to heat up. You caused all of this. Fix it on your own. I poked him. That's precisely what I am trying to do. But I can only get that work done back home, and I need you beside me where I can ensure your safety. I scoffed and turned to Elliot. What about Bella? What about your families? You'll leave everyone behind and just move away. Elliot stood up from his seat, his jaw clenching. Bella's coming with us. And it's only until the issue is resolved. Then we'll move back. What better idea do you have? This is not anything you've experienced before. Nora, we're dealing with some of the worst and most dangerous men out there. My eyes were beginning to sting. How did I get us all into this mess? If I had just declined Xavier's offer to have lunch, if I just hadn't gone down to that coffee shop that one morning, none of this would have happened. I glanced at Ariel, who was still sitting on the couch and staring at the floor. She was nervously chewing on the inside of her cheeks as she silently thought over what was just proposed. Ariel, I called out. She inhaled sharply and looked up at me, her frightened eyes meeting my begging ones. I silently begged her to fight alongside me, to refuse their suggestion and ask for any other solution. This can't be it. I don't know how to deal with any of this, she whispered. I could feel another painful crack tearing through my heart for being part of the reason why she has to face this trouble. Pack up, Elliot announced as he started to move away from the living room. He stopped at the front door and glanced over his shoulder at me. Our flight is tomorrow morning at 9. My throat constricted. I couldn't believe they were serious. That we were actually moving away from my town and we were leaving everything behind. God only knows how long it will take for everything to be fixed. What if it lasts longer than a month? What will happen to my job? We were supposed to get back to work in a few days, and I was moving away with no previous statement. My breathing was coming out rapidly and I felt the room shrinking in on me. Someone called out to me, but the voice was too faint to recognize. I forced my feet to move away from the living room. A hand reached out and gently wrapped around my arm, but I shrugged it and the sparks off roughly. I dragged myself heavily towards the hallway as black spots began to infiltrate my vision. I hardly managed to recognize my bedroom door, and I walked in then slammed the door shut so roughly that the sound ringed through my ears and snapped me out of the attack that was slowly taking over my senses. Chapter 20. Someone was screaming, and I was blinded by a deep shade of crimson red. I could feel one blow after another knocking the breath out of my lungs, my stomach muscles constricting and a bile rising in my sore throat. I couldn't make it stop. The screaming continued, and cold fingers wrapped around my upper arms and shook me in my place. But pain wouldn't stop. A quivering palm caressed my cheek, and a faint voice repeatedly calling out for me began to become clearer by each call. A sharp intake of breath had me shooting up from my seat. My eyes searched my dark surrounding frantically as I backed away from the figure hovering over me. "Nora, it's just me," a female voice yelled. I reached out to my bedside table with trembling fingers and switched on the lamp. The bright orange light illuminated my bedroom, and I found that the figure standing over me belonged to Ariel. She was staring down at me with glassy eyes, her hands clutched at her chest, and her lower lip trembling in fear. I sighed and pushed back the hair strands glued to my sweating forehead, fighting against my ragged breathing to regain composure. "I'm sorry," I apologized to Ariel. "Did I wake you up?" She shook her head, her long strawberry, blonde locks bouncing over her stiff shoulders. I cowed in sleep. I scooted over on my bed, offering a place for her to sit down beside me. She crawled over to my side and sat with her back straight against the bed frame. "I thought you stopped having those dreams." I gulped down a lump in my throat, trying to compose myself to avoid having another breakdown. Waking up from my disturbing dreams always left me feeling so relieved for it being just a fragment of my imagination that I'd instantly break down in tears of joy. "I did," I replied to her statement. Ariel glanced at me, but I avoided her eyes, knowing well enough that they must be filled with her own concerned tears. She always told me that it pained her to see me like this, and I hated having her see me so. When did they start again? I closed my eyes, inhaling sharply. That's the thing. They didn't. Tonight was the first night in years that I'd had to go back to those incessant memories. "Just tonight," I answered. Ariel nodded slowly, her eyes moving to her fiddling thumbs set on her lap. It was only then that I noticed she was in a pair of new jeans and a white blouse. "Why are you wearing that?" Her eyes shot to me in confusion, and then moved to inspect her outfit. "Oh," she exclaimed, shifting over to the edge of the bed and standing up. "I almost forgot. I came to wake you up. We need to get ready. Noah is on his way." I frowned at her words, my brain still half asleep and unable to come up with any reason as to why Noah would be coming over at this time. I glanced at my bedside table to check the clock, but it's 6:47. Ariel nodded. "And our flight's at 9. We need to be there on time for check-in." Flight. Last night's memories suddenly came crashing through and my blood instantly ran cold. Ariel's eyes trailed over my bedroom, and her eyebrows narrowed in confusion. She strode over to my closet and yanked the doors open. I groaned, sliding down on my bed frame and lying flat on my bed, while reaching out for the sides of my pillow and folding them in to cover my ears. Still, I could hear her sharp gasp as she swirled on her heels and stared at me with wide enraged eyes. "Oh my God," she exclaimed. I groaned in disapproval at her tone. She rushed towards my bed and fell down to her knees, reaching out under my bed and shuffling among the mess. I rolled over to my side at the same moment that she backed away and pulled out my black suitcase. "Are you out of your mind? Noah is going to kill us. We have no time to waste. He'll be here any second. Why do you always have to leave everything for last minute?" She freaked on as she unzipped the suitcase and got back to her feet, moving over to my full closet. "Ariel, stop," I demanded, but she cowled and hear me over her mumbling. "Ariel," I exclaimed. This time, she halted in her tracks and spun to face me, her eyebrows raised. "Care to help? I can't pack everything on my own." She turned around again and yanked out a handful of my clothes, shoving them into the suitcase with the hangers still on. In not going, her arm instantly stopped moving. She froze in the middle of her action and snapped her head up to stare at me with horror-filled eyes. "Am not leaving. Ariel, I've decided on it." I shrugged nonchalantly. Her hand came up to rest on her chest, as if she was feeling for her heartbeat. "You're messing with me, right?" I shook my head, sitting up from my position on the bed. "Am serious. Am not leaving again." She gasped and rushed over to me, her hands reaching out to place themselves on my shoulders. "What are you talking about? Of course you're leaving. We're all leaving." I shook my head defiantly. "Ariel, listen." I grabbed her shoulders and guided her to sit down on the bed beside me. "You guys are leaving, and I support that 100%. You need the protection Xavier will provide. But I can take care of anything if anything were to happen on my own. But I need to stay. There's so much for me here that I can't leave behind. I just can't go." I tried to explain to her, though I doubted she would understand me given she continued shaking her head defiantly throughout my entire speech. "You need his protection just as much as we do. Nora, you heard Elliot. These men aren't like anything we've faced before." She argued, but I shook my head. "And what makes you so different from us?" She exclaimed. "Why do you think we need the protection while you don't?" I rolled my eyes as I tried to reason. Their eyes are set on Xavier H.C.S. the target. Once they find out he left to go back to Indiana, they'll follow him along. And there'll be no more dangers roaming around here. She jumped up from her seat. Her eyes narrowed into a dangerous glare. "If you're not leaving, neither am I." I rolled my eyes. "Please, Ariel, this isn't the time for childish play. I'm not leaving without you." I scowled at her stubbornness. The doorbell suddenly rang and its way to my bedroom. Ariel's eyes widened in fear. "Oh God. HES going to kill us." I rolled my eyes once more. "Don't be ridiculous. Open the door." "I'm not facing him." Ariel snorted. "Are you kidding me? You want me to deliver the news so my life would be at stake?" The bell rang again. "Go get it," I insisted. She groaned loudly but complied, walking away towards the front door. I took the chance to compose myself a little, knowing for sure I looked like a huge mess after my sleep. I undid my hair from its messy bun and pulled the loose strands away from my face, then rolled my hair on top of my head into a neater bun. My bedroom door was suddenly burst open, so violently that I heard the door hinges creak in objection. My eyes fell on a fuming Noah. His eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "What do you think you're doing?" I got up from my seat on my bed and walked over to where he stood. "It's as simple as it sounds, Noah." A deep growl rumbled in his chest, and his jaw ticked in fury. "Get ready. Right now. We're leaving." I puckered my lips. "You're leaving." "I'm not." I emphasized each word clearly, tired of repeating myself over and over again since last night. Noah took a step forward, stopping a mere foot away and hovering over my figure in an effort to intimidate me, and he glared down at me with barely contained rage. "I'm not going to repeat myself. Nora, get ready." I scoffed and took a step back to see him in better light. "My entire life is here. Noah, I can't just leave everything behind. I'm not going." "Oh, and you think we want to leave?" "I'm not any more thrilled about following after your boyfriend than you are." I gaped at his words, but he spared me no chance to reply as he instantly spun on his feet to look at Ariel, who was standing silently and nervously by the door, her hands cupped by her chest as she glanced between us worriedly. "Pack her clothes. You have 5 minutes." And with that, he walked out the door into the living room. I gaped at him in disbelief. The nerve. I followed behind his heels and had to jog to keep up with his angry stride. I stopped in front of him and my hands fell to my hips. "Noah, you need to hear me out. No. Nora, what we need right now is to stop wasting time and get going. Because now the numbers have doubled and we need to get out of here as soon as possible." His jaw was tightly clenched as he spoke through gritted teeth. the anger in his eyes no longer directed towards my defiance. "What do you mean? The numbers have doubled." Noah sighed and ran a hand down his face, stroking the small stubble growing on his chin. 6 men are now on our heels. They're preparing for something bigger. I gasped, my hand coming up to cover the evident shock on my features. What? He nodded. Elliot and I had been keeping an eye on things. They doubled overnight. That only means one thing: they're preparing to invade. Soon. My heart began racing at an uncontrollable speed. Go change. We're leaving in 5. I couldn't bring my feet to move even if I wanted to. An indescribable fear clawing at my chest. My hands began to tremble. No, I eventually noticed that I wasn't moving, and he sighed before stepping towards me. His hands came up to my shoulders and he gripped them gently, his promising eyes meeting my frightened ones. Everything will work out, and we will be fine, but we need to get moving. Hesitantly, I nodded my head in understanding. Nora, Ariel called out. You need to help me out here. I don't know what else you need me to pack. I hardly managed to compose myself and spun on my heels. Returning to my bedroom, I found Ariel going to my vanity desk, packing my beauty products. I shook my head as I said, "The clothes are enough." I rushed towards my closet and rummaged through the remaining clothes hanging, and picked a random black shirt and a pair of jeans. I started changing right there in front of Ariel, who was too busy zipping up my suitcase to notice me anyway. I ran over to my study desk and grabbed my laptop and chargers, shoving them in a backpack alongside my passport and credit cards. Done. Noah burst through my bedroom door. Ariel nodded and offered the heavy suitcase to him, to which he instantly took and left with towards the front door. I put on my most comfortable pair of black Vans and inspected my bedroom one last time for anything important that I might have missed packing. Nora, Ariel called out for me. I forced my feet to move towards the living room with a heaviness of heart. Ariel and Noah stood by the front door waiting for me. I reached for the keys dangling behind the front door and stepped outside alongside them. Noah went to hit the elevator button while I locked my door without sparing a second glance at my apartment, too pained by the thought of leaving my home behind without a proper goodbye. The elevator sounded as it reached our floor, and it rung the familiar bell before splitting its doors wide open, welcoming us in for the last time. Let's go. Noah glanced over his shoulder as he barked his order. I swallowed the growing lump in my throat and dragged myself towards the elevator. Chapter 21. Let's get one thing straight: there is no way in hell that I'm staying at anywhere other than ZHS. Noah grunted grumpy as we gradually descended the metal stairway leading from the gigantic airplane we boarded and towards the bus that will be taking us to the terminal. I coughed mockingly. Oh really? How else are you supposed to receive the protection you're practically begging Xavier for? Noah snapped his head to my direction, sending me the deadliest glare he could muster. I knew an equally bad response was just on the tip of his tongue, but he held himself back since we were surrounded by strangers. Sleep deprivation was beginning to take a toll on my life, impacting both my physical and mental well-being. My eyes felt like they were getting poked at repeatedly by a heated fork, the pain extending towards my head into an intolerable migraine. I had spent the first hour our flight writing and sending emails to my boss, claiming I had a family emergency that required extending my vacation, and then texting my parents that it extended my vacation stay at Indiana with my friends. Afterwards, no matter how hard I tried to silence my running, wild thoughts with a nap during the remaining 2 hours on flight, it failed miserably and reopened my eyes feeling twice as frustrated. Eventually, I'd given up completely and ended up watching a movie on my laptop. Will anyone be picking us up? Ariel asked as soon as the bus started moving. I gripped tightly onto the seat to my right, while miserably trying to balance myself and also keep a firm grip on my suitcase that was rolling over strangers' feet. I kept offering apologetic smiles, mumbling a sorry every few seconds. Seth should be waiting outside. Elliot replied. Bella was hunched over by his side, her cheek resting on his shoulder and her eyes closed as she tried to control her breathing. She looked paler than usual. Flight soft and did that to her. She wasn't a huge fan of flying, I pointed my chin towards her. Is she okay? Elliot glanced down at her, his eyes hardening from witnessing her weakened state. She will be. I felt another wave of guilt washing over me like a bucket of ice, cold water. I shivered. Even if this was completely my fault, I still felt responsible for the bigger part. I shouldn't have gone out with Xavier. Those men shouldn't have seen me with him. If I had just kept to myself the way I had been for years, I would be at home right now preparing to go back to work in a few days. And my friends would all be doing the same, each preparing to continue on with their usual smooth daily, instead of having to move away to a different state with no previous preparation, asking for protection from a man we've known for only a couple of weeks. Nora, Ariel's distant voice called out for me, and I was snapped out of the haze my thoughts had formed. I searched for her in the now nearly vacant bus, noticing that it had stopped at the terminal and everyone was stepping off. I grabbed my suitcase and followed behind an elderly man, rushing out towards where my friends waited for me. After nearly 15 minutes spent finishing all the procedures, we reached the gates of the airport and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. My eyes instantly began to ache from the blinding rays, and I squinted hard trying to soothe the pounding in my head. I was in desperate need of sleep, but I doubted I would be getting any proper rest before this whole ordeal was over with. Yo, someone to our left called out loudly, attracting the attention of plenty of passers-by. We all turned to the source of the voice and saw Seth waving us over from across the parking lot, standing beside his car with the driver's door open. We strolled over to where his Jeep parked, and I eyed his car skeptically. Is this our only ride? Seth glanced over his car and shrugged. It was a last-minute call. I couldn't find a bigger ride. You will have to squeeze in somehow. I groaned. Perfect. Shotgun, Elliot announced before anyone had the chance to think it over. Everyone groaned loudly. Well, I am not taking the trunk. I beat the rest to it, moving to pull my suitcase into the open trunk and then rushing to take the window seat behind the passengers. Not it, Ariel exclaimed, rushing in behind me to take the seat behind the drivers. Bella can't take the trunk. Elliot objected the second Noah opened his mouth to speak. She needs a window seat. She's already feeling too unwell. Noah groaned loudly. Oh, come on. He rolled his eyes, but when he looked over at Bella and noticed her weakened state, he shut his mouth and dragged himself forcibly to the back of the car. I glanced over at Bella standing silently beside Seth's car with our suitcases. Elliot was right. Her lips had now taken on a lighter shade, almost matching her skin tone. I called out to her and slid over to take the middle seat. She climbed in after me and took my previous seat by the window, but she immediately rolled down for fresh air, and her head instantly fell to rest on my shoulder. I tried my best not to move for the rest of the ride, knowing just how much she needed the rest, and I was afraid that a slight movement would disturb her sleep. The whole ride was very silent, everyone too tired to speak a single word. Seth had the radio on playing a soft into an unrecognizable music, and he drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. Around half an hour later we arrived at his parents' house, the place we were apparently going to stay at. Good thing was that his parents were away on a cruise, so we didn't have to feel like a burden, as everyone unbuckled and got out of the car. I slightly nudged Bella's arm. Bella, I whispered to her. She hummed and moved around a little. I nudged her arm a little harder, and she lazily opened her eyes. We're here. She inspected her surrounding before finally recognizing what was happening. She pulled back and opened the car door. Sorry about that. Your shoulder must be cramped up. She smiled lightly. I chuckled, shaking my head. Don't worry about it. I'm good. How are you feeling, though? I slid over the seat and hopped out of the car onto wobbly feet. Belle nodded slightly. Better. I don't know when I get used to flying. She rolled her eyes. Ariel had stepped into the house alongside Noah while Elliot and Seth began to unload the trunk. I reached out for Bella and grabbed her arm. She looked up at me with a startled gaze. Can we talk for a minute? She nodded hesitantly. Sure. We moved away from Seth's dark jeepin towards the white wooden porch, moving to the far right. I never had the chance to talk to you about everything that's happened, but I wanted to apologize. I know this isn't easy, and I've messed things up stupidel. She instantly interrupted me, shaking her head firmly. No, don't go there. No, you guys need to hear it. Nora, listen to me. She reached out and put her hands on my shoulders, squeezing gently. No one is blaming you here. What happened was not your fault. Elliot explained everything to me. This thing started from the day we met Xavier and his friends at the lake inn. We just didn't know about it sooner because those people that are supposedly after us are very discreet. And they only proved their intentions when they stepped in and tried to hurt you. You didn't cause any of this. I swallowed a lump forming in my throat. How does Elliot know that? Bella's hands fell from my shoulders back to her sides. Xavier was watching out for any possible dangers because his doubts about them. Apparently HES very guarded and cautious, and likes to constantly keep an eye out on things in case they take a bad turn. She shrugged. The sound of a roaring engine neared us as it rolled into the house's driveway. Bella and I turned to look over the source and I noticed a very familiar car parking behind stood HS Jeepin switching off its engine. My heart immediately leapt out of my chest and I felt a blast of fire charging up my veins, suddenly electrifying me back to life. My droopy eyes were shot wide open and my back straight, and subconsciously I instantly felt more awake. The sudden change in my behavior didn't go unnoticed by Bella, as she eyed me skeptically. I knew for sure that I would have done the same had I been in her place. I was equally confused by my reaction. I frowned at her, and she frowned back. My eyes moved back to the cars and the gaze that I could feel lingering on me. Xavier stood beside Ellie and Seth, shaking their hands in greeting, but his intense silver gaze never left my spot. I felt my stomach clench. He excused himself from my friends and began making his way towards Bella and I, and my stomach did a little flip of its own. Get a hang of it. An inner voice exclaimed at me, annoyed by how easily my mood and behavior can be changed by the stranger's presence. I was beginning to get annoyed at myself too, for something completely out of my hands. I didn't know why I was reacting the way that I was, and I wished the feeling could leave me be. Nora, how are you doing? Xavier greeted me with a warm smile, his eyes glistening as he stared at me with an emotion I couldn't decipher. I could feel Bella's gaze traveling between the two of us standing across from one another, but I was so captivated by Xavier's eyes that I couldn't spare her a single glance. I'll see you inside. Nora, she whispered before heading towards the front door and entering the house. What are you doing here? I asked Xavier. I just came to check up on things. I huffed. Always checking up on things. I mumbled mostly to myself, my gaze moving towards the trimmed grass sashaying from the slight breeze in the front lawn. Xavier frowned in response, his confusion evident on his features. A little crease formed between his eyebrows, and I had to resist the urge to poke the muscle with my index finger, demanding it let loose. Is that supposed to mean anything? I rolled my eyes now. I turned to start heading inside the house, but he reached out just in time to stop me, his long fingers coming to wrap around my arm and halt me in my tracks. I inhaled sharply, his warm touch causing a spark to shoot up my arm. I pulled back, glaring at him for making me feel whatever that was. Xavier straightened his posture, clearing his throat. Can I speak with you for a minute longer? He politely asked. I opened my mouth to say no, but he interrupted me before I had the chance to speak, probably already sensing my answer. What with him and his creepy sixth sense, always predicting the future. It's really important that I clear this out. I sighed, defeated, hesitantly nodding for him to continue on. Believe me, Nora, when I say I'm truly apologetic for having you go through this mess. It was never supposed to happen this way, but as I vowed to you once, I will ensure that no harm gets to you or your friends. This whole thing will be over within less than a week. I promise you that. I stared back at Xavier blankly, hearing his words and understanding the promises he was making, but unable to bring myself to react to any of it. Why is any of it happening in the first place? I managed to whisper against my exhaustion. I made enemies of the most VUL Turoas men, and they're out to hurt me in any way imaginable. I shook my head. No, Xavier. I want the whole story. He stared at me with confusion swarming behind his silver gaze. What did you do to them? I prodded. Realization of which specific answers I was asking for finally hit him and his shoulder muscles stiffened. What made them this upset? Xavier straightened his stiffened back and stood tall across from me. His hand came up to his face and he stroked his trimmed beard, while I watched the wheels run his mind. When he took too long to answer, I rolled my eyes preparing to leave. You know what, Xavier? Never mind. Your business is your business. Just keep your pro. I will explain to you everything in detail, and answer any and all questions you may have. He replied by interrupting me. But not right now. I need a little more time. My jaw clenched visibly, and his eyes moved down to where my jaw muscles twitched. As much as it annoyed me that we will once again have it his way, I couldn't deny the fact that I was in desperate need of rest anyway. Fine. I relaxed my stiff muscles and moved towards the front door of the house. This time, Xavier didn't stop me. The house was awfully quiet. I didn't have the time to explore the place or even fully comprehend where I was stepping. With droopy eyes, I made my way towards the living room and plummeted down to the longest couch available. I reached out under my back and yanked off the pillows, throwing them across the floor. With each leg, I pushed off my shoes and heard them let out a faint thud as they fell to the wooden floor. And within only a few seconds, I was knocked completely out of my senses by the unbearable exhaustion. Chapter 22. The loud clanking of steel pots and pans resonated through the room and teared through my eardrums straight to my brain, and I could feel the pounding against my skull deepening. I groaned as I rolled over the soft cushions of the couch and onto my back, forcing my eyelids apart and blinking against the morning light. I was still in the living room, sprawled out on the couch, with the pillows scattered around the carpeted floor. With another disgruntled groan, I laid my palms flat against the couch and pushed my heavy body into a sitting position. I was more tired than earlier, as if the disrupted sleep did more damage to my brain than the overall sleep deprivation had. I dragged my feet lazily towards the source of the noise, the clanking of pots getting louder by each step. I found a swinging door that led to another room and I pushed my way through, finding myself greeted by an amusing scene. Seth positioned counter with his torso covered by a plain white apron, his hand circling around a bowl as he mixed its contents. As the door swung shut, his head snapped up and his gaze fell on me. He offered me a wide grin. Morning. Sunshine. He continued on mixing the mixtures in the bowl as I propped led down on a stool across from him. Why didn't you take one of the rooms upstairs? There are plenty of beds in this house. You know. I nodded. I couldn't find the energy to move away from the couch. My gaze shifted around the kitchen, surveying my surrounding. It was an elegant, light-colored kitchen with marbled counters and silver stools. It was the first time I had visited Seth's parents' house. Your parents have a gorgeous house, by the way. He smiled appreciatively as he turned to move towards the stove, fixing a pan over and igniting a faint fire. Thanks. How did you sleep last night? Seth glanced over his shoulder at me as he waited for the pan to heat up. Or should I say, the entirety of yesterday. I rolled my eyes. I barely got 4 hours of sleep. He frowned at my reply, the skin on his forehead creasing disapprovingly. But you were knocked out cold the whole day. I was in and out. My body had shut down, but I was wide awake. My hands traveled to my eyes and I began to rub them tiredly. Seth frowned some more, before he had a chance to comment. The kitchen door was swung open and in walked Ariel and Elliot. They mumbled a greeting and reached out for the stools on each side of me. Ariel sitting down to my right while Elliot took my left. Seth returned to his pan and began pouring the eggs he mixed earlier with chopped vegetables into the heated pan, making omelets. Wow, you look like shit, Ariel commented, inspecting my reddened eyes. I rolled my eyes, not answering back with a petty comeback because I knew she was absolutely right. I pushed myself off the stool and hopped down on wobbly legs. Well, you'll go freshen up. Let me know when breakfast's ready. I turned towards the door when I suddenly realized I didn't even know where the bathrooms were and stopped in my tracks. As if sensing my confusion, Seth immediately spoke up. "Find any room on the first floor that isn't occupied and it's yours. Each have their own bathroom." I nodded and mumbled a thanks, reaching the living room and grabbing the only remaining suitcase from the hallway. I strolled towards the long stairway, carrying my suitcase with both hands until the first floor. I was breathing heavily by the time I reached the top, my body too weak from malnutrition. I reached out for the first door to my right and lowered the handle, peeking through the darkness. Noah was sprawled out on the king size bed positioned in the middle of a spacious room, his arm draped over his eyes and his chest bare. I closed the door shut and reached for the one across from Noah's claimed bedroom. To my luck, it was unoccupied. I set my suitcase down by the king-sized bed, unzipping it and digging through for my toiletries and a fresh pair of clothing. Once I had what I needed, I made my way towards the bathroom. The insides of the bathroom was absolutely gorgeous, with light wooden counters and a huge glass shower stall. I locked the door behind me and wasted no more second before discarding of my clothes and hopping under the steamy showers. I scrubbed at my skin with whatever little energy I had left within me, and massaged with my favorite mango-scented shampoo, hoping its relaxing aroma would aid to my pounding headache. When my stomach began to rumble ferociously, I forced my body out of the stall, grabbing the nearest towel and drying off. It smelled like lavender, and I dried off the last droplet on my skin. I could tell my body had absorbed its floral scent. I wrapped the towel tightly around my body, the bathroom too foggy that breathing in the presence of the heat became rather challenging. I grabbed my clothes and headed towards the bedroom where I could change freely. As I pulled my wet hair into a messy bun to allow the back of my neck to cool off, I headed out the bedroom and towards the staircase, hearing the loud chattering of everyone resonate through the house. I reached for the kitchen door and my stomach instantly began to rumble as the smell of bacon hit my senses, as if my body was begging me to consume some protein to fuel my energy. Ariel was hunching over the counter to grab a piece of bacon from the plate in Seth's hands, and he shoo-ed her away, frowning and scolding her for touching the food when it was still so hot. Ariel didn't even flinch, biting onto the flaming bacon strip. I prop-led down on the same stool I claimed earlier, grabbing a plate and filling it up with scrambled eggs and toasted bread slices, smothering warm butter on top and taking a huge bite. Unintentionally, I hummed in satisfaction as I chewed on the crunchy bits of my toast and savored its taste. Ariel was eyeing me weirdly, her gaze inspecting my face. "Did you get any sleep last night?" "No, she didn't," Seth answered for me, raising his cup of coffee and taking a sip from it. I glared at him, dropping the last half of my toast on my plate and grabbing a mug to pour coffee in. "Was it the nightmares again?" Ariel asked, rather automatically. My head snapped to her sharply, eyes widening while my brows furrowed dangerously, silently screaming, "What the hell?" "Ariel." Elliot raised his head from his plate, glancing between Ariel and I, before anyone had a chance to comment. The door swung open and Bella and Noah trod in, mumbling a good morning and immediately reaching for the coffee pot that I had set aside. Elliot's eyes remained on me. "You're having them again." I shook my head, denying it. "No." "What is she having?" Noah asked, hoisting himself on the counter across from us, facing us directly. He raised his navy blue mug to his lips and sipped on the coffee, his eyes remaining on Elliot, who was still staring at me. "Scrambled eggs and toast." I deadpanned as I grabbed my fork again, stuffing my mouth with food so they wouldn't ask me any more questions. Ariel sighed. "It's not a big deal. Nora, we can get you on that." My fork abruptly dropped onto my plate with a loud clank, silencing Ariel. She flinched at the loud noise. "May I eat my breakfast in peace?" I asked rhetorically. Noah frowned. "I see," he mumbled. My head snapped to him and my glare sent daggers at his head. "And what is it that you're seeing exactly?" "Noah," Seth whistled, turning around and refilling his cup with black coffee. "Cranky Nori is back." I scoffed. What did you just call me? Elliot clapped his hands. All right. Enough. Girls, ales. I was thinking, how about we go to the city after breakfast and hang about in a coffee shop? Maybe even do a little shopping. Belle suddenly cut in, her face lighting up brightly as she suggested her plan. When Ariel heard the word shopping, a wide grin spread across her face and she instantly nodded. They both turned to look at me, and I just shrugged. I guess we could. I went back to eating my food, the slight rumble in my stomach reminding me that it was not yet satisfied and craved more. I'll drop you guys. I have a few errands to run myself, Seth offered. Around 10 minutes later, once I felt too full to breathe properly, I dropped my spoon on the plate and slumped down in my seat. Ariel was watching me expectantly, and as soon as she read my expression and posture announcing that I was done with my breakfast, she hopped off her seat excitedly. Come on. Then, let's get ready. She yanked me by the hem of my top, leading me off the stool and towards the door. I followed Grumpy, dragging my feet behind as she led me up the stairs. I've already changed. Ariel. She stopped to glance at my black-fitted sweatpants and gray crop top, raising an eyebrow skeptically. That's homeware. Not nearly suitable enough for a stroll in the city. GTSK, Ed, reaching out for my hand once again and pulling to guide me up the stairs. I groaned but followed along until we stopped by a door. We walked in and were greeted by a mountain of clothes built on the edge of the unmade bed. How she managed to unpack all those clothes in less than a day was beyond me. I think you'll go for this yellow floral dress. What do you say? She held up a casual, bright knee-length dress. I knit them, searching through my expression. I nodded. It's beautiful. She smiled appreciatively and turned towards the bathroom. Leaving to change, I assumed. I slumped down on her bed, my hands searching between her clothes to notice that she had packed as if she was moving in, rather than only staying for a week. Ariel Ray appeared in the bedroom a couple minutes later, her bright dress on and her strawberry, blonde hair cascading down her bare shoulders in natural waves. All right, time to doll you up. I cringed at her choice of words, but quickly covered it up with a tight, forced smile that came out looking more like a grimace. Ariel reached for my arm and pulled me towards the door, where we left and headed down to my borrowed bedroom. After nearly 15 minutes spent searching through my packed clothes, ironing them straight, quickly drying my hair, and applying a decent amount of makeup, Ariel truly had dolled me up to near perfection. I almost looked normal, the only exception being my bloodshot eyes and the permanent grimace on my face. We reached the ground floor to see Seth and Bella already waiting for us in the living room, watching some cooking show displayed on the wide TV. As our footsteps neared, they noticed our appearance and got up from their seats. Ready? Seth asked, and we nodded. We left through the front door to his car and hopped in, Ariel claiming shotgun, as if it even mattered anymore. We had matters way more threatening to brood over, and their nonchalant attitude, wanting to go shopping and stroll freely in the city center, was doubling my feelings of unease. Let's check this one out, Ariel exclaimed, and without waiting for a reply, vanished into a store to our right. Bella and I gave each other a look, and followed behind her. Seth dropped us off in the middle of the city and went off to God knows where, and we had already been to at least 7 different shops in the past hour and a half. We had been to a few branded clothes shops, a couple of shoe shops, and a few smaller antique shops which Bella found intriguing from their window displays. But Ariel wasn't even nearly satisfied. The shop we entered was another antique shop, and Ariel stopped at a nearby counter to inspect the displayed necklaces. She reached out for one and began to inspect the shining stones dangling from the bronze chain, her eyes twinkling with astonishment. The young owner stood behind the counter watching Ariel dubiously, and I reciprocated his looks, eyeing him with just as much doubt. What do you think about this piece? Ariel asked, turning around with the necklace dangling from her finger. It's beautiful, Bella commented. My eyes remained on the owner, as he kept his gaze fixed on Ariel. Suddenly, they moved to me, and he was so startled by my inspecting gaze that his eyebrows rose and he fixed his posture, shifting on his legs awkwardly. "Nora," Ariel called out to me. I snapped my head towards her to see her eyeing me weirdly, then turning to look at the owner. She frowned in confusion. "It's nice." I mumbled, slowly coming back to my senses. I don't know if I should get it." Ariel wondered as she placed it against her neck and studied it through the small mirror set on the counter. "Hey, I'll run a quick errand down a store on the other side and I'll get back to you." "Yeah, just wait for me here. I'll be back in a few," I announced as I walked towards the door. Belle and Ariel both turned to watch me leave, opening their mouths like they were about to protest. But I gave them no chance as I stepped outside the shop and continued down the road towards another one. The large red sign got bigger as I neared the pharmacy, and when I walked in, the bells over the door rang to announce my arrival. An old, short lady in a white coat appeared through a door behind the counter and offered me a small smile. I returned the gesture and strolled down the aisles, grabbing random products such as a pack of Band-Aid, a navy blue packaged deodorant, and a toothbrush. I walked to the counter and set them down, eyeing the boxes of medicine behind the pharmacist. When my eyes met hers again, she offered me another kind smile. "Do you need anything else, dear?" her soft voice questioned. I nodded. Yeah. I need some light sleep medication. Please." My heart began racing just speaking those words. The pharmacist nodded, turning around to search through the packages. "Any specific type you're comfortable with?" I shook my head. "Anything will do." She eyed me for a second too long. Before nodding, she grabbed a box and a plastic bag, bagging up the products I picked and eyeing each skeptically. My fingers were beginning to twitch, eager to just grab the bag and run out of the store, until eventually she rounded them up and announced their cost, which I quickly paid for. She gave me back the change and offered a final smile, telling me to have a good day. But I didn't wait for her to finish her sentence as I grabbed the bag and stalked towards the door. I clutched onto the plastic bag tightly, my jaw clenching. I had gone such a long way to reach a point where I no longer needed to consume medication in order to have some peace. And now I was back to point one. I clenched my fist so tightly and felt my long nails digging into my palms, leaving an itching ache. "Everything all right?" My head snapped up to the source of the voice, and my furrowed brows slowly relaxed. "Yeah." I forced out a smile. Belle eyed the plastic bag in my hands curiously. "What did you get?" "Just some necessities. Deodorant, toothbrush." I rolled the bag and shoved it into another paper bag containing a cute top I had bought earlier from a small local shop. "Did you get the necklace?" I asked Ariel. She shook her head. "Was completely my style." "So where to next?" I asked, pushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "We were thinking of going back actually, but Seth hasn't finished yet. We can just grab a taxi," I suggested. "We thought of that," Ariel began, until a car pulled up and the driver offered to take us back to ZHS. I frowned. Belle nodded, gesturing behind her to the huge black SUV with dark tinted windows standing to the curb. A man in a neat black suit standing at the head with his hands behind his back. My frown deepened. "Who is he?" "HE's been sent by Xavier," Bella answered. "That's bullshit," I scoffed. Ariel's eyes widened, and Bella's mouth clamped shut. I eyed the man skeptically, seeing him give no reaction even though I was positive he could see my glare even from the distance. "We're getting a cab. We can't be foolish enough to trust a stranger's words. Not at a time like this." Nora, it's fine." "HE's from Xavier's," Ariel began to speak, but I shook my head. "Just because he says so doesn't make it true." I accidentally snapped a bit too harshly. Bella raised her hands. "Whoa." She glanced over her shoulder at the man and turned to look at me again. "Well, just take a cab." I immediately turned to search the cars driving down the road, and called out for a passing cab. Let me at least tell him we're taking a cab so he can leave. Ariel turned to start towards the stranger with the black SUV, but I grabbed her hand tightly to stop her. No, we don't need to do that. Let's just go home. I didn't wait for an answer as I guided her towards the cab, opening the back door and waiting for them to climb in first before I spared one last glance at the standing driver, seeing him holding a phone to his ear. And then I climbed in after the girls and asked the cab driver to go off. Chapter 23. By the time we arrived, a car was already parked in the house's driveway, and it was ZHS. We exited the cab after paying the cost of the trip, and trod towards the house carrying our shopping bags. As we neared the front door, it became clearer who the car belonged to as the familiar, random wave of excitement rushed through my veins. Stepping inside the house, a mixed aroma of mahogany and rainwater wafted through the air. We stopped at the living room where we spotted, dropping our bags to the floor. We circled around to enter the living area and face whoever occupied the couches. Across from Elliot and Noah sat Xavier, his back straight and fingers interlocked over his lap, as if he was waiting patiently for our return. At the same moment, our eyes met, and his silver orbs shimmered under the lights. Took you guys long enough, Noah murmured, standing up. He turned towards the kitchen. Anyone want a drink? He yelled back as he continued walking, not even waiting for an answer. What are you doing here? I asked Xavier. He stood up and inched closer, stopping a feet away. I heard about what went down in town, he replied, and I suddenly realized that I failed to assure you. He stopped and looked around at everyone else in the room. All of you that no harm will ever get to you in this town. The entire state. Actually, rest assured that you have my full protection here. Elliot hesitantly nodded, and we are very grateful for it. Thank you. But what about the man from earlier? The driver? Ariel asked. Elliot tensed at her words, his shoulders straightening. What man? He seethed. The driver. Luca, I had truly sent to pick you up, since I had heard Seth had to go off to care to a business of his own, and you had no ride back. Xavier reassured Ariel, and simultaneously 3 pairs of eyes Avier's, Ariel's, and Bella's turned to me. Ariel pursed her lips and raised her brows, as if silently saying, I told you so. I rolled my eyes. Well, the hell, how in the world was I supposed to trust a complete stranger inviting us to ride in his car? At a time when we are literally being hunted down. Ariel went silent, pondering over my answer. You made the right move. Nora, I realize I should have personally informed you that I'd send a driver for you. I apologize for the confusion, Xavier said, offering a small smile. I nodded in understanding, telling him it's all right. Would someone explain to me what went down? Elliot was clenching his jaw, not liking being left in the dark. Bella went on a rant about what happened, from the moment I went off to a different shop to the point where I apparently shoved them into the back seat of the cab. I rolled my eyes at her exaggeration, making it clear to everyone present that I was not that violent. Bella chuckled. Why did you go off on your own? Elliot turned to me, frowning. I shrugged nonchalantly, telling him I just needed to grab some necessities. Yeah, but you don't go off alone when we're clearly being hunted down. He repeated my words from earlier, and for some reason, his words triggered me. I clenched my jaw and spoke through gritted teeth. You'll be fine on my own. Elliot stepped away from his seat, inching closer to me. This isn't the time to play stubborn. Nora, I'm not being stubborn. I'm just telling you that I'll be fine on my own. I stood my ground, my hands clenching by my sides. Oh yeah, fine like you were last time you decided you're fit to take on shit on your own. His face was turning a light shade of red, and his eyes looked wild as he stared me down. And I did take it on, didn't I? I growled. Yeah, like a champ. My fist flung forward involuntarily, aiming to hit him square in the jaw. But halfway through, a strong arm wrapped around my waist and pulled me back, so my fist met the air. I stumbled forward had the arm not been secured tightly around me. I thrashed in the arms of my captor, demanding they let me go. Snap out of it. Nora, our entire lives are in danger now. One wrong move and everything could go downhill. We need to stick together. Elliot yelled as I gave the chest behind me a strong shove and set myself free. I turned to glare at Xavier, whose arms slowly fell down to his sides once again. His jaw was also clenched, and he stared between Elliot and I as if he was searching for an answer among us. I turned to spit more words at Elliot, but the second our eyes met, I shut my mouth. I bit the inside of my cheek, trying to calm myself down so I don't make a bigger deal out of what happened. "What's going on?" someone asked in the distance, but my heart was clenching and unclenching so hard that I couldn't remove my eyes off of Elliot's. "Screw you," I finally spat, his words from earlier leaving an aching hole in my chest. Elliot's eyes widened for a fraction of a minute, not expecting my words. They softened as he opened his mouth to reply, and at the same moment my vision started blurring, and I took that as my cue to leave before the tears came streaming down. I shoved past his shoulder and strode out of the living room, hearing footsteps following behind me as Ariel immediately started going off at Elliot. Warm fingers suddenly wrapped around my arms and halted me in my track. I turned around as I tried to contain the face and came to face Xavier, who was giving me the most heartbroken, apologetic look. His eyes softened even further as he noticed my expression. "I am genuinely very sorry to have caused you all this trouble, Nora." His tone was so low, almost as a whisper, and the pain was evident behind his voice. I shook my head. "This one was your doing." Xavier opened his mouth, looking like he was about to push his apology further, but instead he hesitated for a few seconds. "Let me take you away." My only reply was a frown of confusion. "Until everyone cools off." He continued. I really wasn't feeling like staying in the same house when the tension was so high, so I nodded in approval. Xavier gave me a soft smile and gestured towards the front door. I walked past the living room, completely ignoring everyone there, not even bothering to let them know what I was up to. As I walked past, I noticed the shopping bags from earlier, and I immediately grabbed mine as well as my purse and stalked out of the front door. Xavier stalled behind me, and I could hear him informing the rest that he will take me for a ride until things cool off, adding a promise that I will be completely safe within his presence. I reached his car and instantly hopped into the passenger side, violently jerking the car door back shut. A few seconds later, Xavier followed and climbed into the driver's seat. And without another word, he drove off down the road and away from the suffocating tension in the air.